Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and this message, it was sent to me by one of our admins. So as our admin was going around the village, this other village, as he was just taking some videos, like those videos that we use when we would be posting some episodes on our channels. So as he was taking those videos, he said that he met this other old man who was also herding his cattle. Then the old man asked him what he was doing with his phone close to that river where that old man was busy herding his own cattle. Then our admin said that he tried to explain what he was trying to do, but the old man seemed not to understand what social media is. But he said that anyway, he wanted to share his own story. So this is the story that he shared with our admin. The message that was sent to me by our admin reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? I am an old man, but I want to tell you what happened after I had traveled from the village going to the city. I went to the city. At that time, it was still called Salisbury, and I had been called by my own uncle who was working as an undertaker for this other company. Then after independence, that was when I was allowed to travel with one of this other driver who was an undertaker. I used to travel with him as his assistant driver. So this man, what he would do is that whenever we were supposed to travel from Salisbury going to a village that was very far, and this man, he used to give me some herbs before we would have gotten into the car. These charms that he would give me, they were powdered, and he never told me what type of charms he was giving me, but he only told me that these charms that he used to give me so that I can rub them on my forehead, some of it he would mix it in water. Some of it he would mix it with water, and he would tell me to drink, and he will do the same. He said that these charms were to make sure that we will never see any ghosts or any evil spirits, because back in those days, a lot of people in our country, they were using a lot of evil charms. Some had charms so that the white people that they were working for can love them. Some even had charms so that the charms can protect their marriages or their livestock. So most of the people that came to Salisbury to work with those charms, when they would have died, then those charms would follow them back to the village. And you know who would be driving that car? It was that man that I was working with as his assistant driver. So he explained the situation to me, and he said that for a very long time he had been attacked by several spirits that he didn't even understand. So I thought that maybe this man was joking or something was wrong with him. But there was one night when we were supposed to travel from Salisbury going to another town. Whilst we were on the road, that was when suddenly the car broke down. When this car broke down, Brother Nashi, after he had tried fixing it, because this man, he knew how to fix cars, he tried fixing it, and when he went back into the car and when he switched on the engine, Brother Nashi, instead of us hearing the engine turning on from the front of the car, but we heard that the engine seemed to turn on as if it had been placed inside the coffin that was at the back of that Peugeot that we were traveling in at that time. That was the most scary stuff that I had ever seen. This man then told me not to run away. He said that if you run away, then this ghost is going to chase after you. So I stood there, Brother Nashi, as I was shaking. He told me that we both had to insult the spirit of this man who had died. We started insulting him, and he told me to tell that man that I was not related to him in any kind of way. Therefore, he had no right to scare us like he was doing. We were just doing our job. We were supposed to move him from Salisbury, returning him back to his village. We insulted him a lot, and when the engine kept on running, and when we kept on hearing the sound coming out of the coffin instead of the front of the car, he then said that we should take some soil. So we picked up some soil, then we started throwing that soil at that man's coffin, insulting him. We insulted him a lot until finally this sound just stopped. We drove all the way from that spot where the car had died down until we had arrived at his village. And this happened. That was when I started to believe that indeed ghosts are real. In those days, the stories of ghosts were all over our country. Wherever we would go to, if we would pick up some people so that we can make a little bit of money, we used to pick up a lot of people on our return trip. People were even afraid to get into our car since this was a funeral car, and people would always tell us stories all over the country. When we finally returned back to Salisbury, what this man had not told me was that even though these herbs that he had made me to drink and to use on my forehead by rubbing the powder on my forehead, I was actually making myself to be visible towards demonic forces as well as those evil spirits and the spirits of the dead that were just roaming around the world. So this man did not tell me about the disadvantages. He only told me about the advantages. And my brother, when we returned back, I felt that I was really different. Like for instance, each and every time that I was at our mortuary, I was always feeling like there was someone that was following me. Each and every time that I would go to the fridges, like to remove the body of a deceased, I would feel like that person was always watching over me. It was now my habit that at each and every time when I would go to remove a corpse from the fridges, I would always ask someone to accompany me because I was always afraid. When it came time for me to go back to the village, when it was time for me to be on my off, I returned back to the village, and as always, each and every trip when I would return back to the village, I always had a brand new radio. Back in those days, we used to have these single-decked radios that we used to call Trident radios. Those were battery operated and they used cassettes. So every time when I would return back home, I always made sure that I had one with me. And when I would be in the village, I would always go and drink beer like I had never done. And since I had money, I then went and I started drinking beer, and I then returned back home. This was somewhere around 12 when it was midnight, and it was during that time when it was really cold. When I returned back, as I was on my way returning back home, I then felt like I just needed to smoke my cigarette. I then looked for a spot where I could just stand whilst I was lightening up my cigarette. And on that night, there was a full moon. So I whispered to myself as I was looking for my box of matches. I then said that I wanted to thank God and the ancestors because they had made it a full moon, because now I could properly see. As I was whispering to myself, I then heard the voice of a woman. This woman just said, "Hey, why are you saying that it is a full moon? Is the light even yours?" I looked around and I didn't see anyone. I got so scared, like even the way that I was drunk, I instantly became sober, because this voice that said, "He, now you are saying that it is a full moon, is that light even yours?" just appeared out of nowhere. I looked around and I saw no one. So I then found that box of matches. So since I was now shaking because of the voice that had spoken to me, and I could not see that person that had spoken to me, I was really vibrating and I was shaking. My hands were shaky. And I tried to scratch that stick of matches, my brother. I saw a big flame that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. This big flame, it was about maybe 2 meters from where I was standing. I got really scared and I looked at that big flame. Then it just disappeared like someone had snapped a finger. So I started running. I dropped everything down that I was holding, except from my Trident radio, because it was quite expensive. As I was running, my brother, I then stumbled and I fell down. There was this other small rock that was close to the gravel road. So I started swearing at that rock that had made me to fall down. This rock, my brother, it started moving. It started moving slowly as it went further into the bushes. This really shocked me when I returned back to the gravel road, because I said that instead of me running through the bushes, let me use the gravel road that I know very well. I then saw that in the middle of that gravel road there was a big gum tree. You know those gum trees? I said, what is this tree doing here in the middle of the road? Because I had traveled along this road millions and millions of time. Mind you, I was born in this village, so I know each and every corner of this village. So this tree that had just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. As I was looking at that tree, I saw that this was not a tree, but it seemed to be a kind of a monster that looks like a tree. This thing, it was really tall. I could not even see its head. It was really tall. I kept on running and running. But what bothered me and scared me even more was that the more that I ran, the more that I found myself doing the same stuff over and over again. I would run, trying to run away from that tree or monster that resembled a tree. Then as I would be screaming, I would find myself coming from that place where I used to drink alcohol with the Trident radio on my shoulder as I was playing my music. Then as I would enter that bushy area, that is when I'll stop so that I can take my cigarette. Then as I will be looking for the box of matches, then I would thank God and the ancestors for making it a full moon, because if it was dark, I was going to find it very difficult to find that box of matches that I was looking for. Then I would hear again that same voice of that woman that was like invisible. She kept on saying the same thing over and over again. That box of matches that I would have found, I would drop it because of fear. Then I'll start running, and upon running, then I'll stumble upon that rock. Then after cursing it, the rock will start moving into the bushes. This thing happened over and over again. To me, when this thing was happening, I would remember that, but I have done this before. Then the thing would repeat itself again. It happened throughout the night. Then the next morning, there was another man, and this man that found me, he picked me over there. This man that picked me, he was from another village. I had walked for several kilometers and I was in another village. I had walked for hours throughout the night in a wrong direction. When this man picked me up, he said that the reason as to why he picked me up, it was because he saw that my legs were so swollen, as well as my arms, they were really swollen. He took me to his compound where I told him my story, and they knew that I had seen a ghost. They told me that this thing that I had met, it is called a koritoto, that I had met, that was notorious in that area. So those people then told me that they were taking me to a traditional healer, because if I was not going to be cleansed by a traditional healer, I was going to die, because I had met a spirit that I was not supposed to meet. So they took me to a traditional healer. Then that traditional healer said that he saw that the charms that had been given to me by that man that I was working with, they were charms that made me to be able to see spirits of the dead, evil spirits, good spirits. After he had cleansed me, my brother, my mom refused for me to return back to Salisbury. That is how I ended up being here in the village, never returning back again to Salisbury. Dear listeners, right there was a narration of a message that was sent to me by one of our admins as he was busy taking some videos so that we can use them on our videos that we post on our channel. That was when he met this old man from that village that he was walking around just taking some simple videos. Then that old man asked him what he was doing, and he tried to explain everything that he was doing. And that old man said, okay, let me give you my own story, even though he doesn't understand what YouTube is all about. But that was his own story. I wish that we can get more stories from him about these ghosts. If you have any story about a ghost that has been notorious in your country, you can come to my inbox and share your own story with us, and I will share your story right here on our platform. Your strange things do happen in this world. Just imagine coming across a tall figure that will give you problems throughout the night.